Hi and welcome to this video in the QPSMR Insight Up and Running series, and in this video we're going to be looking at building variables from the questions you have in your questionnaire. Now first of all, what is a variable? A variable is where you want to analyse or use the data from your questions or possibly an existing variable to present the data in some other way. So what does that mean perhaps in English? So you might want to, first of all, let's take some very simple examples and we'll work on 2 or 3 examples. We have here, for example, a question called age, which you can see has 4 age groups. We might want to group those into 2 age groups so that we could analyse our respondents by just 2 groups rather than the 4 groups that were asked on the questionnaire. So it's a way of analysing data in a different way to the way perhaps it was collected. Also, we've got questions here like question 4, which asks how many bicycles people have owned in the last 5 years. We might want to put that into some ranges, so we might want to know how many people have had 1 to 2 bicycles, 3 to 4 bicycles, 5 or more bicycles. So we can pick up the data that's in question 4 and present it in some aggregated or different way. And then there might be things that we want to combine things together from more than one question. So we have a gender question and an age question here. We might want to see how many males there are within a particular age group, how many females within a particular age group. So we've actually put together answers from more than one question. And there's no limit to the complexity you can go to, although this video is going to keep pretty much to the basics. All right, let's start then by defining some variables. Now there's one golden rule with variables that can be a frustration sometimes if you don't realise this when you're doing it. When you're entering variables, you can only refer to variables before the point where you're entering that variable. And you can see now I've got the cursor on question 4. If I insert a variable between question 3 and question 4, I can only refer to questions or variables that are before that. So I couldn't refer to gender at this point because as far as QPS is concerned, it doesn't know about that question at that point. Now many users just go to the bottom and add all their variables to the bottom and then of course every question is available, but it is something that occasionally catches people out, so I thought it was worth warning you of that in this video. Alright, so I'm going to add my variables at the bottom here, and I'm going to start first of all with something slightly different to what we talked about just now. I'm going to look at question 3. If we look at question 3, you will see it is a list of magazines. The first 5 codes are magazines, and then the 6th one is a none of these. Now let's say I want to add a response to this that is just any magazine. I've got none of these at the bottom here, but I want any magazine. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a copy of question 3 and copy it to a variable so that I can add that extra row that we were just looking at. So let's do that. Let's copy this entry. Let's go to the bottom because I'm going to put my entries and my variables at the bottom. Paste it back. Choose the variable copy, and you'll see it's automatically given it a name of VQ3. You haven't got to call it VQ3. We could call it QQ3. I think it's just a good practice to put a V on the front, then you know it's a variable that you've created. We want it to come after age, so click OK. And what we have now is just actually a replica of Q3, but called VQ3. One's a question on the questionnaire that you ask respondents, and one's not a question that the respondents wouldn't see if you did data entry. It's just a copy, but in terms of analysis, it will give you the same thing as question 3 as it stands. Now, what we're going to do with VQ3 is add that extra row of any magazine. So let's look at how we do that. We can just click on this so that we can update it. We can go into the responses, looks just like it did just now in question 3, and in here we could insert a response. So I'm going to click on insert a response, and it puts me in the syntax window, so I could use some syntax to say I want any of these 5 magazines. And we're going to come to syntax in a little while. For now we're going to do it through button selections or using the mouse and typing. So definition here, I'm going to click on that. going to pick Insert. I'm going to pick question 3 because that's the question I want to make my selection from. Up come the list of magazines, and I want any in the first 5. Now, by default, it selects one response. That's not what I want here. I want to pick a range of responses. So I click on Range, hold the Shift key down, and if I select the 5th one, it'll pick the ones in between as well. So I've got 1 through to 5 highlighted here. Click OK. Now the text it's going to assign to this extra response is just the first and last with dot dot in the middle. So we don't really want to say on 2 wheels dot dot on the saddle. That doesn't really mean much. So we might just put in the text here, any magazine, and we might put the word subtotal or something like that. Click OK. And there it is now in that extra response at the top. Click OK and make sure you save it. You can see I've got 7 responses now, and OK again. Save my work. And if we run a quick table now on VQ3, we can analyse it by gender, for example. We can see that, well, actually, all 3 people have got any magazine, which would have happened anyway because everyone's picked that magazine. But if there was somebody in the none of these categories, we would have got a different number in here, and the balance, of course, would be in there. So that looks as though it's working. So that's any magazine added. Now, there is another way of doing that. We could do exactly the same thing by block copying the question 3 into a variable. So let's now go through the project Insert a Variable menu, and let's call this VVQ3 this time. I'm going to do almost the same thing as I did before. So this is Q3 subtotal. I could go into responses, and you'll see there's a button here called Block Insert, which allows you to drop in all the answers from a particular entry. So I'm going to click on Q3, and you can see I've got all the answers in here from question 3. Again, if I saved it now, it would be exactly the same. So this effectively is doing the same as the copy paste did in a quicker step. And of course, now I could go into block insert. Sorry, I could go into insert a response in here, and I could go and select a definition. Well, I'm going to use syntax this time, so I'm going to pick questions 3, and the syntax I need here is any answer in the range of 1 to 5. If I just wanted answer 1, I could type 1, and you can see on the text it picks up on 2 wheels, the first of the magazine. If I put in dot dot 5, it's going to pick any of those answers in the range 1 to 5. And you can see we've got the same thing with the text here. And again, I can say any magazine, subtotal in brackets. And I've effectively done exactly the same thing as I did before, but I've done it by block inserting. So that's just another way of doing the same thing. All right, so let's move on to some other things that we can do with variables now. Let's, for example, perhaps look at question 4, which is the number of bicycles that respondents have owned in the last 5 years. Let's want to put that into some ranges. So that's been collected as an integer. I might want to put people into some ranges here. So let's insert a new variable. Let's call it VQ4. I'm going to make it single because I'm only going to have one place in each of the range. Q4 in ranges. And now I can insert my ranges. So I might pick, for example, first of all, people who selected Q1 1. So that would be 1. You might want to edit that again as 1 bicycle. I could insert another response. So this time I won't use the syntax, I'll use the definition. So I'm going to select, insert, question 4, and maybe I want the range of people who said 2 to 4. Okay, and you can see it's put the syntax in for me effectively. I could have just typed that, and I might want to change the text down here to 2 to 4 bicycles. Okay, so there's the syntax sitting there. You'll see it puts a $sign on as well. That is sort of redundant. You don't need to type that $sign, but if you do type it, it's fine. It's just the QPS puts a dollar in front of its questions and variables that you select from. Click OK. response. So now we perhaps want people who picked more than 4 here, and I can use the greater than symbol to say greater than 4, which will be 5 or more, of course, or I can do that again by selecting menus, question 4, more than, and I pick more than 4, which I might put as 5 plus bicycles. And I put my respondents into 3 discrete ranges now of 1, 2 to 4 and 5 or more. A little bit obscure that, but if you want 5 or more, you have to enter it as greater than 4. Alright, so we've done that variable now, and again we can test that just to see what that looks like. Do a quick table. We can analyse VQ4 and we can see that nobody had 1 bicycle, 1 person had 2 to 4, and 2 people had 5 or more bicycles. Now there's nothing stopping you building variables from variables, so we could combine answers from VQ3 with VQ4. You can use them just like you can questions. Nothing difficult about that, just all the same procedures. The only thing that might catch you out, and it's worth noting this, is that if you were to refer to VQ3, the first response in VQ3 is now in eMagazine, and the second response in VQ3 is the code 1 on 2 wheels. So if you are referring to VQ3 and you wanted to just pick on 2 wheels, if you pick it from Q3, it's response 1, but if you pick it from VQ3, it's actually response 2, as you can see over here, because it's the second one in the list. So that's something just to be aware of and be careful with when you're using variables in QPS. The final thing I'm going to do is start to set up a banner so that I can use various things across the top of a number of tables, which is a common thing that people do with their data when analysing results and producing tables in QPSMR. So let's say for this example, I want gender, age and question 1 across the top of my tables in a variable I'm going to call banner, or some people call them breaks or headers. So I'm going to insert another variable now, down here, calling it banner. It needs to be multiple responsing if I'm picking more than 1 question to go into my banner, because a respondent will go into this probably 3 times, once for their gender, once for their age, and once for their answer at question 1. Into responses, I have forgotten to put my text in, so let's go back and do that. I'm going to put in banner here. Into responses again, block insert. So I'm going to pick gender first of all. Click that, and you can see it pulls in the words male and female and the definition for me. I'm going to block insert the age now. And there's my 4 age groups. And I'm going to block insert question 1, which puts in whether they own a bicycle or not. Now, that would be good enough if you wanted to do something quickly, maybe, but it might be quite good to put a header above this so that we know this is the gender, this is the age groupings. And particularly here, if on our tables it will just come out with yes and no as across the top of the columns, which might not be very intuitive for people using the tables. So how do we go about putting in these headers then? So let's look at this step by step. So we put in gender here, and the way we do this is that we type in the word gender and we put a backslash in to indicate that what precedes that backslash is a header for the subsequent columns. And we can do the same thing down here with age, and down here we can do the same thing, bicycle, yes, no. So that's put in a header, and that'll make it a little bit more clear when we produce tables. And if we want to see that, we could just save that work, do a quick table, and in our columns we can pick banner, and we could do banner by banner here if we wanted to, and you can see now that they're nicely headed with gender above the gender columns and so on. So we've got a nice looking cross tab there, albeit with only 3 respondents. If we wanted to do a bit more work on this, we might decide that although we've block inserted these questions so that we've got the 4 age groups as they actually were on the questionnaire, we might, for example, want to group together anybody 35 plus, or maybe show an additional row. Let's just assume we want to group together anybody 35 plus. We could edit this either by going into definition again or by just typing in the syntax. I'm going to type in the syntax this time. Type in 3.4, and again what it will give me here is 35 to 54 ... 55 plus, which of course I would edit down to 35 plus. Now if I didn't want the 55 plus because I put all of the 55 plus people into that 35 plus category, I can just delete that. And so now I've collapsed down my my 4 age groups into 3. And also we could do something like age within gender, so we could actually insert something else in here. We could say we want, I'm going to do it through the definition first time, so definition, insert, we could pick people who are male, okay, and we could insert again, and you can then pick age, and let's pick a range of 16 to 24, so this is people who are male who are 16 to 24. Now by default you'll see it put the word and in there. If you click on that you could change that to or. That's not what I want on this occasion. I'm actually happy with the idea. I've got people who are gender 1 and age 1 or 2. And I could edit that text again as male 16 to 34. I could even in fact put a heading in there as age within gender as I did before. Click OK, and that's gone in as males 16 to 34, and now I might choose females 16 to 34. I could insert, and this time I'm going to use syntax gender 2 and age 1 to 2, and this time I can just edit it down 16 to 34, and I'll probably take the word and out there, and that's got my females 16 to 34, and I could do a similar thing if I wanted to do females and males over 35 over. And of course now if I do a table, let's do a quick table, type banner in here of course, or select it. I'm going to pick question number 2 in here from the table, and we've got 2 people who answered that question. They both say the same thing as it actually. You can see now I've got my different categories here and my new age within gender already prepared. So that's an introduction to using variables in QPSMR Insight. There's a more high level version of this in the next series, but I hope this was useful to you and you find the video useful. Thank you.